The baby wouldn't stop crying. Nia pressed little Zoe closer to her chest, feeling the heat radiating from her daughter's tiny body like a furnace against her own exhausted frame. The fever had started 3 hours ago, spiking so fast that Nia's hands shook as she tried to cool her down with wet towels in their cramped studio apartment. But nothing worked. The baby's temperature kept climbing, and now her breathing was becoming labored, each small gasp sending terror straight through Nia's heart. She had $12 to her name. $12 and no car, no insurance, and no one to call. Her phone had been disconnected 2 days ago, and the neighbors who might have helped were either not home or pretending not to hear her desperate knocking. The nearest hospital was 8 blocks away through the worst part of town, but she had no choice. Her baby was dying in her arms. The rain started just as she stepped outside, cold droplets that felt like tiny needles against her skin. Nia pulled her thin jacket tighter around Zoe, trying to shield her from the storm, but water seeped through the worn fabric within minutes. Her sneakers, already falling apart at the seams, squelched with each step as puddles formed in the broken sidewalk. "Please, baby, just hold on," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "Mommy's going to get you help." By the 3rd block, her legs felt like rubber. She hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days, saving what little food she had for Zoe. The world began to spin slightly, but she forced herself to keep walking. Her daughter's life depended on it. The wealthy part of downtown looked like another planet compared to where she lived. Clean streets, bright lights, expensive cars parked along pristine curbs. Nia felt like an intruder in her soaked clothes and worn-out shoes, but she didn't care about pride anymore. Only Zoe mattered. She was crossing the street toward the hospital when her vision started to blur. The lack of food, the exhaustion, the overwhelming fear, it all crashed down on her at once. Her knees buckled, and she stumbled forward, clutching Zoe desperately as the pavement rushed up to meet them. The last thing she saw was the blinding headlights of a black luxury car, its tires screeching as it came to a stop just inches from where she collapsed. The last thing she heard was a man's voice, deep and urgent, shouting something she couldn't make out as darkness claimed her completely. When consciousness started to return, it came in fragments. The steady beep of machines. The soft rustle of clean sheets. The absence of rain and cold. And most importantly, the sound she had been praying for, her baby's steady, normal breathing. Nia's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a hospital room unlike any she had ever seen. Everything was pristine white and chrome, with equipment that looked expensive and state-of-the-art. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over walls decorated with actual artwork, not the standard motivational posters she expected. This wasn't the county hospital she had been struggling toward. "Zoe," she whispered, panic flooding her system as she tried to sit up. "Where's my baby?" "She's right here," came a gentle voice from the corner of the room. "She's sleeping." Nia turned to see a man standing by the window, holding her daughter carefully in his arms. He was tall with dark hair and kind eyes, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked rumpled, as if he had been there for hours. Zoe looked peaceful against his chest, her fever clearly broken, tiny fingers wrapped around the lapel of his jacket. "Who are you?" Nia's voice cracked with exhaustion and confusion. "Where am I? What happened to my daughter?" The man approached slowly, as if not wanting to startle her. "My name is Ethan," he said softly. "Ethan Rivers. You collapsed in front of my car about 6 hours ago. Your daughter had a severe fever, so I brought you both here to Mercy General's private wing. The doctors say she's going to be fine, it was just a bad case of flu, but she needed 4 fluids and medication to bring the fever down." Nia tried to process what he was telling her, but nothing made sense. Private wing? Expensive rooms? This kind of care cost thousands of dollars she didn't have. "I can't pay for this," she whispered, tears starting to form. "I don't have insurance. I don't have anything." Ethan carefully placed Zoe in the small hospital crib next to the bed, making sure she was comfortable before turning back to Nia. Don't worry about that right now. The important thing is that you're both safe and healthy. But I can't just accept charity, Nia protested, though even as she said it, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. You don't even know me. Why would you help us? Something flickered across Ethan's face. A shadow of old pain that disappeared so quickly she might have imagined it. Because someone needed help, he said simply. And because. He paused, looking at the sleeping baby. Because every child deserves a chance to be healthy and loved. The simplicity of his answer somehow made it more powerful. Nia studied his face, looking for signs of ulterior motives or hidden agendas, but all she saw was genuine concern. Still, years of struggling on her own had taught her to be suspicious of kindness, especially from wealthy strangers. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. Ethan sat down in the chair beside her bed, his movements careful and non-threatening. Nothing, he said. I want nothing from you except to know that you and your daughter are okay. When you're ready to leave here, that's your choice. But I hope you'll let me help you figure out your next steps. Nia closed her eyes, feeling more vulnerable than she had ever felt in her life. She was completely at the mercy of this stranger's kindness, with nowhere to go and no way to provide for her child. The smart thing would be to thank him and leave as soon as possible, to maintain her independence and dignity. But looking at Zoe sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, she realized that maybe pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. I don't understand why you're doing this, she whispered. Maybe you don't need to understand it right now, Ethan replied gently. Maybe you just need to accept that sometimes good things happen to good people. When Nia woke again, morning sunlight was streaming through the large windows, and she felt more rested than she had in months. For a moment, she forgot where she was, luxuriating in the softness of clean sheets and the absence of the usual aches from sleeping on her broken mattress. Then reality came flooding back, the rain, the collapse, the stranger who had saved them. Zoe was awake in her crib, babbling happily and reaching for a colorful mobile that definitely hadn't been there the night before. Her fever was completely gone, her cheeks pink and healthy instead of the frightening flush they'd had during the crisis. The sight made Nia's eyes fill with tears of relief. Good morning, came Ethan's voice from the doorway. He was carrying a tray of food and looked fresher than she expected, though she noticed he was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. How are you feeling? Better, Nia admitted as she sat up carefully. Much better. Did you stay here all night? Ethan set the tray on the rolling table and moved it within her reach. I wanted to make sure you both were okay. The doctor said Zoe's fever could spike again during the night, so I thought someone should be here just in case. The tray held more food than Nia had seen in weeks, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and coffee that smelled better than anything she remembered. Her stomach growled loudly, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Please eat, Ethan said gently. You need to keep your strength up for her. He nodded toward Zoe, who was now trying to grab her own feet and gurgling with delight. Nia wanted to maintain some dignity, to politely refuse and insist she was fine, but the smell of the food was making her dizzy with hunger. She took a small bite of eggs, then another, then found herself eating with embarrassing enthusiasm while Ethan pretended not to notice. The doctor wants to keep Zoe for observation one more day, he said, sitting down in what she was starting to think of as his chair. Just to make sure the fever doesn't return. After that, she'll be ready to go home. The word home hit Nia like a physical blow. She had been so focused on the immediate crisis that she hadn't thought about what came next. Their apartment was gone, she had been 3 months behind on rent when the landlord finally changed the locks yesterday. Their few possessions were probably already thrown away. She had no job, no money, and now no roof over their heads. I don't have a home to take her to, she said quietly, setting down her fork as her appetite disappeared. We were evicted yesterday. Everything we owned is gone. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Nia braced herself for the pity she had seen in so many faces before. Instead, when he spoke, his voice was matter-of-fact. "Then we'll figure out something else." Nia looked up sharply. "This isn't your problem to solve. You've already done more than enough." "Maybe I have," Ethan agreed. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop now." He leaned forward slightly. "I have a guest house on my property. It's fully furnished, has its own kitchen, completely private. You and Zoe could stay there while you get back on your feet." "I can't accept that," Nia said immediately, though part of her heart leaped at the offer. "I don't take handouts." "It's not a handout," Ethan replied. "I also happen to need someone to help manage my household staff and handle some administrative work for my company. The pay isn't much, but it includes housing and health insurance. Consider it a job offer." Nia stared at him suspiciously. "You don't even know if I'm qualified for that kind of work. Are you?" She thought about it honestly. Before Zoe was born, she had worked as an administrative assistant for a small law firm. She was organized, good with people, and comfortable with computers. "I could be," she admitted. "Then it's settled." "Nothing is settled," Nia protested. "I don't understand why you're doing this. People don't just help strangers like this. What do you really want?" Ethan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable than she had heard it before. 5 years ago, I was driving home from work late one night. It was raining, just like last night. I came around a corner too fast and hit a car that had broken down on the side of the road." He paused, his shoulders tense. There was a family inside. A mother, father, and their little girl who couldn't have been much older than Zoe is now. Nia felt her breath catch in her throat. "The father died instantly," Ethan continued, still not turning around. "The mother and daughter were critically injured. I called for help, stayed with them until the ambulance came, paid for all their medical expenses. But the little girl, she didn't make it. And the mother never forgave me, no matter how much I tried to make it right." The room was completely silent except for Zoe's soft babbling. "I'm not trying to buy forgiveness or make up for what I did," Ethan said finally, turning back to face her. "But if I can help someone when they need it, if I can make sure a child stays safe and healthy, then maybe some good can come from all that pain." Nia felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She had been so focused on protecting herself from people who might take advantage of her desperation that she hadn't considered that he might have his own reasons for helping, reasons that had nothing to do with her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That must have been terrible." "It was," Ethan agreed. "But finding you and Zoe last night, being able to help instead of hurt, it felt like maybe the universe was giving me a chance to do something right." Nia looked at her daughter, who was now attempting to eat her own fist and looking perfectly content with life. She thought about their options: a homeless shelter if they were lucky, sleeping in their car if they weren't, always wondering where the next meal would come from or what would happen if Zoe got sick again. "If I agreed to this arrangement," she said carefully, "it would be temporary. Just until I can save enough money to get our own place." "Of course," Ethan agreed. "As temporary as you need it to be. And I would work for everything you give us. I don't want charity. I wouldn't expect anything else." Nia took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to jump off a cliff. "Then yes," she said. "I accept your job offer." For the first time since she had met him, Ethan smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Good," he said. "I think this is going to work out well for all of us." Looking at Zoe, who chose that moment to let out a delighted giggle, Nia found herself hoping he was right. The guest house was nothing like what Nia had expected. When Ethan had mentioned it, she had pictured something small and basic, maybe a converted garage or a tiny apartment above a main house. Instead, as his driver pulled through the electronic gates of his estate, she found herself staring at what looked like a small cottage from a fairy tale. "This is where we're going to live?" she asked, shifting Zoe in her arms as they walked up the stone pathway lined with flowering bushes. "I hope it's suitable," Ethan said, producing a set of keys from his pocket. "It's been empty for a while, but I had the housekeeper stock it with everything you should need." The front door opened into a living room that was bigger than her entire previous apartment. Soft leather furniture arranged around a fireplace, built-in bookshelves filled with actual books, and large windows that looked out onto a garden that belonged in a magazine. The kitchen was small but modern, with granite countertops and appliances that looked like they had never been used. "The bedroom is upstairs," Ethan explained, leading the way. "There's a crib already set up for Zoe, and the bathroom has everything you should need." The bedroom was painted in soft blues and whites, with a queen-sized bed covered in fluffy pillows and a comforter that looked like it cost more than Nia used to make in a month. Next to it sat a beautiful wooden crib filled with toys and blankets, ready for a baby who had never owned anything that wasn't secondhand. "This is too much," Nia said quietly, feeling overwhelmed by the generosity. "The furniture alone probably costs more than most people make in a year." "It's just things," Ethan replied, but she noticed he seemed pleased by her reaction. "Things that should be used and enjoyed, not sitting empty." Over the next few hours, he showed her around the property, the main house where he lived, the pool and gardens, the small office building where she would be working. Everything was beautiful and expensive, but also somehow warm and welcoming. It didn't feel like the cold, sterile mansion she had expected. "Your first day of work is Monday," Ethan explained as they walked back toward the guest house. 9 to 5, with an hour for lunch. "The work is mostly organizing files, managing schedules, and handling correspondence. Nothing too complicated." "What about Zoe?" Nia asked, the practical concern starting to set in. "I can't afford childcare, and I don't know anyone here who could watch her." "There's a daycare center in the office building," Ethan said. "It was built for employees' children. She'll be right down the hall from where you're working." Nia stopped walking and stared at him. "You have an on-site daycare?" "Several of my employees have young children," he explained. It seemed like good business sense to make it easier for them to work. That night, after Zoe was asleep in her new crib, Nia sat in the living room trying to process everything that had happened in the past 2 days. She had gone from homeless and desperate to living in luxury, with a job and security she couldn't have imagined. It felt too good to be true, which made her nervous. She found herself studying every detail of the house, looking for hidden cameras or signs that this was all some elaborate setup. She checked the doors and windows, memorized the exits, and made mental notes about everything valuable enough to be held over her head later. Years of struggling had taught her that nothing came free, and generosity this extreme always had a price. The next morning, she woke to find a note slipped under her door along with a credit card and some cash. "For groceries and anything else you and Zoe need. The PIN is 1234. Use it without guilt, this is part of your employment package. See you Monday." Nia stared at the credit card like it might bite her. She had never held one with no spending limit, never had access to money she hadn't earned through blood, sweat, and tears. The responsible thing would be to buy only necessities, to spend as little as possible and prove she wasn't taking advantage of his kindness. But when she looked at Zoe, who was wearing the same 3 outfits in rotation because they were all she owned, Nia felt something crack inside her chest. Her daughter deserved pretty clothes and toys and all the things other babies took for granted. Maybe it was okay to accept a little more help, just for Zoe's sake. The shopping trip was both wonderful and torturous. Wonderful because she could finally buy her daughter everything she needed without counting every penny. Torturous because she felt guilty about every purchase, even the most basic necessities. She bought Zoe new clothes and diapers, formula and baby food, toys that would help with her development. For herself, she bought only the most basic work clothes and a few personal items. Still, when she looked at the receipt, the total made her feel sick. In one trip to the store, she had spent more than she used to have for an entire month of expenses. That afternoon, she was folding Zoe's new clothes when she heard a knock at the door. Ethan stood on the porch holding a bottle of wine and a bag that smelled amazing. "I thought you might like some dinner that you didn't have to cook," he said. "If you're not too tired." Nia hesitated. Having him in the house felt different from meeting him at the hospital or being shown around the property. More personal. More intimate. But Zoe chose that moment to let out a happy shriek from her playmat, and Ethan's face lit up with genuine delight. "She sounds happy," he said. "She loves her new toys," Nia admitted, stepping aside to let him in. "Thank you for everything you bought today. I promise I'll pay you back once I start working." "There's nothing to pay back," Ethan said firmly. "This is exactly what the money was for." They ate dinner sitting on the floor next to Zoe's playmat, watching her discover the wonders of a toy that made music when she pressed the buttons. The conversation was easier than Nia had expected, flowing naturally from topic to topic. Ethan asked about her background, her plans for the future, her dreams before Zoe came along. She found herself telling him things she hadn't shared with anyone in years. "I wanted to be a teacher," she admitted as they watched Zoe attempt to crawl toward a colorful ball. "Elementary school, maybe kindergarten. I love working with kids, seeing them learn and grow." "What stopped you?" Ethan asked. "Life," Nia said simply. "Zoe's father and I were together for 2 years. I thought we were building something real, something permanent. I was halfway through my education degree when I got pregnant. He seemed excited at first, talked about getting married and being a family. But when she was actually born..." She shrugged, trying to make it seem less painful than it was. "I guess the reality was different from the fantasy. He left. Disappeared completely. Blocked my number, moved out of his apartment, quit his job. I haven't heard from him since Zoe was 3 weeks old." Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching Zoe succeed in grabbing her ball and immediately try to eat it. "His loss," he said finally. "Anyone who could walk away from her is an idiot." The simple, matter-of-fact way he said it made Nia's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She had spent so many nights wondering what was wrong with her, what she had done to make Zoe's father run away. Hearing someone else say he was the problem, not her, felt like a gift. "What about you?" she asked, needing to change the subject before she started crying. "Ever been married? Kids?" Something shuddered behind Ethan's eyes. "No," he said. "Work has always been my priority. Building the company, making it successful. There hasn't been time for much else." Nia sensed there was more to the story, but she didn't push. They were both entitled to their secrets, their protected spaces. As long as he treated her and Zoe well, his personal life was none of her business. Later that night, after he had gone back to the main house and Zoe was asleep, Nia stood at the bedroom window looking out at the gardens. Everything about her situation should have felt perfect, but something nagged at her. Maybe it was too many years of having to be suspicious, too many times when apparent kindness had hidden ulterior motives. She thought about Ethan's story from the hospital, about the family he had accidentally killed. It explained his motivation for helping them, but it also made her wonder what else he might be carrying around. What other guilt, what other needs that their presence might be fulfilling. As she got ready for bed, Nia made herself a promise. She would accept his help because Zoe needed it, and she would work hard to earn everything he gave them. But she wouldn't let herself forget that this was temporary, that depending on someone else's kindness was dangerous, no matter how genuine it seemed. She would save every penny she could, and as soon as she had enough for a deposit on their own place, she would move out. It was the only way to protect herself and her daughter from the inevitable disappointment that came when people realized that helping others was harder than they expected. But as she drifted off to sleep in the most comfortable bed she had ever known, with her daughter sleeping peacefully nearby and no worries about rent or food or medical bills, Nia allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Nia woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves about her first day of work. She dressed carefully in one of the conservative blouses and skirts she had bought over the weekend, then spent extra time making sure Zoe looked perfect in her new outfit. The daycare center was everything Ethan had promised and more. Bright, cheerful rooms filled with age-appropriate toys and activities, with trained staff who welcomed Zoe like she had been coming there for months. Nia felt a pang of guilt at how easily her daughter adapted, babbling happily at the other children and reaching for colorful toys that probably cost more than some families spent on food. "She'll be fine," said Mrs. Rodriguez, the daycare director, noticing Nia's hesitation. "We have cameras in every room, and you can check on her anytime through the app on your computer. Most parents peek in at least a few times during their first week." Nia's office was on the second floor of the building, a bright space with windows overlooking the gardens. Her desk was equipped with a new computer, multiple phones, and stacks of files that needed organizing. A nameplate reading "Nia Johnson, Executive Assistant" sat prominently in the center, making the job feel more real and official. "Good morning," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Ethan stood there with 2 cups of coffee, looking every inch the successful businessman in his perfectly tailored suit. "Ready for your first day?" "As ready as I can be," Nia replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. It was exactly how she liked it, with just a splash of cream and no sugar, though she didn't remember telling him her preferences. The work itself was exactly what he had described. She organized files, managed his calendar, answered phones, and handled correspondence with vendors and clients. It was the kind of work she had done before, familiar and comfortable, though the scale was much larger than she was used to. Ethan's company imported luxury goods from around the world, and every decision seemed to involve thousands or even millions of dollars. What surprised her was how often Ethan checked in on her throughout the day. He would stop by her office to see how she was adjusting, bring her documents to review, or simply ask if she needed anything. It wasn't micromanaging, he clearly trusted her to do the job, but rather the attention of someone who genuinely cared about her comfort and success. At lunch, she went down to check on Zoe and found her daughter napping peacefully alongside several other babies. The sight made her heart swell with gratitude and relief. For the first time since Zoe was born, she could work without worrying about her daughter's safety and care. "How's it going?" Ethan appeared beside her as she watched through the observation window. "Better than I expected," Nia admitted. "The work is interesting, and everyone has been very welcoming. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." "Thank you for taking it," Ethan replied. "You've already made my life easier, and it's only been one day." As the weeks passed, Nia settled into a routine that felt more stable and secure than anything she had experienced in years. She would wake up in the comfortable guest house, dress herself and Zoe for the day, then walk across the garden to the office building. Work was challenging but rewarding, with responsibilities that grew as Ethan learned to trust her judgment and abilities. In the evenings, she would pick up Zoe from daycare and return to the guest house, where she had begun cooking dinner on the expensive appliances and eating at the small dining table that looked out over the garden. Sometimes Ethan would join them, bringing wine or dessert and staying to help with Zoe's bath time or bedtime routine. Those evenings were dangerous territory for Nia's emotional walls. Watching Ethan read bedtime stories to her daughter, seeing how gently he handled her tiny body during diaper changes, listening to him make silly voices for the characters in her books, it all felt too much like the family life she had once dreamed of having. "You're good with her," she said one evening as they watched Zoe crawl around the living room, exploring every corner with determination. "She makes it easy," Ethan replied, catching Zoe just before she could pull herself up on the sharp corner of the coffee table. "She's such a happy baby. You've done an amazing job with her." The compliment hit Nia harder than it should have. She had spent so many months feeling like she was failing as a mother, unable to provide for her daughter's basic needs, let alone give her the comfortable life she deserved. Hearing someone acknowledge her efforts, especially someone who had no reason to flatter her, made her eyes fill with unexpected tears. "Hey," Ethan said softly, noticing her reaction. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Nia said quickly, wiping her eyes. "It's just, no one has ever told me I was doing a good job before. With her, I mean. Her father made me feel like I was ruining her life just by having her." "Then her father was an even bigger fool than I thought," Ethan said firmly. "Zoe is lucky to have you. Anyone can see how much you love her." That night, after Ethan had gone back to the main house, Nia sat in the rocking chair next to Zoe's crib and tried to make sense of what was happening to her. She had expected to feel grateful for Ethan's help, even indebted to him. What she hadn't expected was how safe she felt in his presence, how easy it was to talk to him, how right it felt when the three of them were together. She was falling for him. The realization hit her like a physical blow, making her stomach drop and her hands shake. She was falling for her employer, her benefactor, the man who held all the power in their relationship. It was the stupidest thing she could possibly do, and yet she couldn't seem to stop it from happening. The smart thing would be to start pulling back, to keep their relationship strictly professional, to remind herself constantly that he was helping her out of guilt and charity, not because of any special feelings for her. But when Saturday morning arrived and Ethan showed up at her door with pancake mix and fresh berries, offering to make breakfast while she slept in, Nia found herself letting him in without hesitation. "You don't have to take care of us on weekends too," she protested weakly as he tied an apron around his waist and started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "I want to," Ethan said simply. "Besides, I make excellent pancakes. It would be a shame to waste that talent." They spent the morning like a real family, cooking together, feeding Zoe tiny bites of pancake, laughing at her delighted reactions to new flavors. Ethan was patient and gentle with both of them, never making Nia feel like a burden or an obligation. When Zoe got fussy, he walked her around the garden until she calmed down. When Nia mentioned needing groceries, he offered to drive them to the store and help carry everything. It was perfect. Too perfect. And that's what scared her the most. That afternoon, while Zoe napped and Ethan worked in the garden, Nia called her old friend Tasha, needing to talk to someone who would give her honest advice. "Girl, you are living in a fairy tale," Tasha said after hearing the whole story. "Rich, handsome man saves you and your baby, gives you a job and a house, spends his free time playing daddy. That only happens in movies." "That's what I'm afraid of," Nia admitted. "What if this is all some kind of fantasy for him? What if he gets bored, or decides we're too much trouble, or meets someone he actually wants to be with? Zoe and I have nowhere else to go." "Or," Tasha said, "what if he's genuinely a good man who cares about you both? What if you're sabotaging something real because you're scared?" "I have to be scared," Nia protested. "I have Zoe to think about. I can't take risks with her security." "Honey, you're already taking a risk. You're living in his house, working for his company, letting your daughter get attached to him. The question is whether you're going to enjoy it while it lasts, or spend the whole time waiting for it to end." After the call, Nia sat in the garden watching Ethan plant new flowers while Zoe played on a blanket nearby. He had dirt under his fingernails and sweat on his forehead, and he looked happier than she had ever seen him. When he caught her watching, he smiled and held up a handful of bulbs. "Tulips," he called out. "They'll bloom next spring. Zoe will love the colors. Next spring." As if he assumed they would still be there, still be part of his life when the flowers he was planting came up from the ground. The casual certainty in his voice made Nia's heart flutter with hope and terror in equal measure. Maybe Tasha was right. Maybe she was so focused on protecting herself from future pain that she was missing out on present happiness. But as she watched Zoe reach her chubby hands toward the man who had saved them both, Nia knew that whatever happened, there would be no going back to who she was before she met Ethan Rivers. The only question now was whether she was brave enough to see where this path might lead. The first real storm since they had moved to the estate arrived on a Thursday night in November. Nia was putting Zoe to bed when the power went out, plunging the guest house into complete darkness. Her daughter immediately started crying, frightened by the sudden change, and Nia felt around blindly for the flashlight she remembered seeing in one of the kitchen drawers. A knock at the door interrupted her search. Ethan stood on the porch with a battery-powered lantern and an armload of candles, his hair wet from the rain. "Power's out all over the property," he said, stepping inside when she gestured for him to come in. "I thought you might need some light." Together, they set up candles around the living room and bedroom, creating a warm, flickering glow that seemed to calm Zoe immediately. The baby was fascinated by the dancing shadows on the walls, reaching her tiny hands toward the flames while Nia held her safely at a distance. "This reminds me of when I was little," Ethan said, settling onto the couch as Nia rocked Zoe in her arms. "We lived in an old house that lost power every time there was a storm. My mother would light candles and tell us stories until the lights came back on." It was the first time Nia had heard him mention his family, and she found herself curious about the childhood that had shaped him into the man he was now. "What kind of stories?" "Adventure stories, mostly. Pirates and treasure hunters, brave knights saving kingdoms." She had this amazing imagination. His voice grew softer, more distant. She said the stories were better in candlelight because they felt more mysterious and magical. "She sounds wonderful," Nia said carefully, sensing deeper waters beneath his words. She was. Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching the candle flames dance. "She died when I was 15. Cancer. It happened very fast." "I'm sorry," Nia said, meaning it. "That must have been devastating." "It was. My father, he didn't handle it well. Started drinking heavily, stopped going to work, basically shut down completely. I had to grow up pretty fast, figure out how to take care of both of us." He looked up at her with a sad smile. "I guess that's why I'm so focused on work now. It was the only way to survive back then." Nia shifted Zoe to her other arm, the baby now drowsy and content in the warm candlelight. "What happened to your father?" "He died 5 years ago. Liver failure." Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact, but she could hear the pain underneath. "We weren't close by then. I tried to help him, get him into treatment, but he didn't want to be saved. Some people just can't find their way back from that kind of loss." The honesty in his voice made Nia's chest tighten with sympathy. She understood now why he had been so determined to help her and Zoe, why he seemed to find such satisfaction in taking care of them. He was trying to save people in a way he hadn't been able to save his own family. "I never had parents to lose," she found herself saying, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I grew up in foster care, moved around a lot. I used to dream about having a real family, people who would love me no matter what." Ethan looked up at her with surprise. "I didn't know that." "It's not something I usually share," Nia admitted. "Most people either feel sorry for you or assume there must be something wrong with you if your own parents didn't want you. But the truth is, some people just aren't ready to be parents. Some people make mistakes they can't fix. Like Zoe's father." Nia nodded, looking down at her daughter's peaceful face. "I met him when I was working at the law firm. He was a client, going through a divorce. He seemed so charming, so together. He said all the right things about wanting a family, about being ready to settle down." She paused, remembering the pain of those early days. "I think he meant it when he said it." But when Zoe actually arrived, when he realized what being a parent really meant, he panicked. "Do you miss him?" "I miss who I thought he was," Nia said honestly. "I miss the future I thought we were going to have. But I don't miss him specifically, if that makes sense." "You can't miss someone who was never really there." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the storm rage outside the windows. Zoe had fallen asleep in Nia's arms, her tiny body warm and relaxed. The candlelight made everything feel intimate and safe, like they were in their own private world separate from the chaos outside. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "Sure. Are you happy here? Really happy, not just grateful or relieved?" The question caught Nia off guard. She had been so focused on being thankful, on proving she deserved his help, that she hadn't really examined her own emotions beyond that. But now, sitting in the candlelit room with her daughter sleeping peacefully and this man who had become so important to them both, she realized the answer was surprisingly simple. "Yes," she said. "I am happy. Happier than I've been in years, maybe ever. That scares me sometimes." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I don't know how to trust it," Nia admitted. "Good things don't usually last in my experience. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong." Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious in the flickering light. "What if nothing goes wrong? What if this is just life? Good life, the kind you deserve to have?" "I don't know if I know how to believe that." "Then maybe I can believe it for both of us until you're ready." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to address directly. Nia felt her heart racing, aware that they were approaching territory that would change everything between them. "Ethan," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "I know this is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this might be a bad idea. But I also know that I care about you. Both of you. More than I probably should. More than an employer should care about an employee. More than someone should care about people he's only known for 2 months." Nia looked down at Zoe, who was sleeping so peacefully, so secure in the knowledge that she was safe and loved. Her daughter had never known what it felt like to want for anything, to worry about where her next meal was coming from or whether she would have a roof over her head. In just 2 months, Ethan had given her the kind of childhood Nia had only dreamed of having. But what if it all disappeared? What if she let herself believe in this fairy tale only to have it crumble around them? "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," Ethan admitted. "I've never felt this way about anyone before. I don't know how to do this, how to be what you and Zoe need." "You already are," Nia said before she could stop herself. "You already are what we need." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the candlelit guest house, everything felt still and charged with possibility. "The power will probably be back on soon," Ethan said eventually, though he made no move to leave. "Probably," Nia agreed, though she found herself hoping it would stay off a little longer. "I should go back to the house, let you get some sleep." "You should." But neither of them moved. They sat there in the warm glow of the candles, with Zoe sleeping peacefully between them, and for the first time since they had met, allowed themselves to imagine what it might be like if this wasn't temporary. If this was real. If this was forever. When the lights finally flickered back on an hour later, the spell was broken, and reality came rushing back. Ethan helped her blow out the candles and carry Zoe upstairs to her crib, then stood awkwardly in the doorway as if he wasn't sure how to say goodbye. "Thank you," Nia said. "For the light, for staying, for everything." "Thank you for letting me," Ethan replied. "For trusting me with your stories." After he left, Nia lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of their conversation. Something had shifted between them tonight, some wall had come down that she wasn't sure she could rebuild. For the first time since she had met him, she allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to stop being afraid, to stop waiting for disaster, to simply let herself fall completely in love with the man who had already saved her life in every way that mattered. The thought terrified her. But it also, for the first time in her life, felt like coming home. The weeks following the storm brought a subtle but unmistakable change in the dynamics between Nia and Ethan. The walls they had carefully maintained began to crumble, replaced by a growing intimacy that felt as natural as breathing. Small touches became more frequent, his hand on her back as he passed behind her chair, her fingers brushing his when he handed her documents, moments that lingered just a beat longer than professional courtesy required. Nia found herself looking forward to their interactions with an anticipation that had nothing to do with work. When she heard his footsteps in the hallway outside her office, her pulse would quicken. When he smiled at something she said, warmth would spread through her chest like sunlight. She caught herself studying his face during meetings, memorizing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way he absently ran his hand through his hair when he was concentrating. The dangerous part was that he seemed to be doing the same thing. She would look up from her work to find him watching her with an expression that made her stomach flutter. During their evening dinners at the guest house, he would lean closer when she spoke, his attention completely focused on her words. When they played with Zoe together, she caught him looking at her with something that looked remarkably like longing. "You've been different lately," her friend Tasha observed during one of their phone calls. "You sound happy. Like, really happy, not just grateful to have a roof over your head happy." "I don't know what you mean," Nia lied, but she could hear the smile in her own voice. "Girl, please. You're glowing through the phone. What's happening with you and Prince Charming?" Nia sighed, settling into the comfortable chair by her bedroom window. "Nothing's happening. We're just... I don't know. We're friends. Friends who have romantic candlelit evenings during power outages." "You make it sound more dramatic than it was." "Was it dramatic?" Nia was quiet for a moment, remembering the way Ethan had looked at her in the flickering candlelight, the way her heart had raced when he said he cared about her. "Maybe a little." "I knew it. So what are you waiting for? The man is obviously crazy about you." "It's not that simple," Nia protested. "He's my employer. He holds all the power in this relationship. What if I'm reading the signals wrong? What if he's just being kind, and I'm projecting my own feelings onto him? What if you're not?" Tasha countered. "What if he's just as scared as you are? What if you're both sitting around waiting for the other person to make the first move while missing out on something beautiful?" The conversation stayed with Nia for days, making her hyper-aware of every interaction with Ethan. She found herself analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for clues about his true feelings. The uncertainty was driving her crazy, but she couldn't bring herself to risk the stability she and Zoe had found by making assumptions about his intentions. The turning point came on a Saturday morning in December. Nia woke to find fresh snow covering the gardens, transforming the estate into a winter wonderland. Zoe was fascinated by the white world outside their windows, pressing her tiny hands against the glass and babbling excitedly at the unfamiliar sight. "I don't think she's ever seen snow before," Nia said when Ethan appeared at the door with hot chocolate and pastries from the nearby bakery. "Then we have to take her outside," he said immediately. "Every child should experience their first snow properly." They bundled Zoe in warm clothes and carried her out to the garden, where she stared in wonder at the white landscape. When Ethan scooped up a handful of snow and let it fall through his fingers, she shrieked with delight and reached for the falling flakes with both hands. "She's going to be freezing," Nia worried, but she was laughing as she said it, infected by her daughter's joy. "Just for a few minutes," Ethan promised. He knelt down in the snow and showed Zoe how to make tiny snowballs, her mittened hands clumsy but determined as she tried to copy his movements. Watching them together, Nia felt her heart swell with an emotion so powerful it took her breath away. This was what she had dreamed of when she was pregnant, a father figure who would delight in her daughter's discoveries, who would create magical moments and memories that would last a lifetime. Zoe deserved this kind of love, this kind of attention, and seeing her receive it from Ethan felt like watching a miracle unfold. "You're going to spoil her," she said softly, kneeling beside them in the snow. "Good," Ethan replied, lifting Zoe up so she could see over the garden wall. "She deserves to be spoiled. You both do." The way he said it, with such fierce certainty, made Nia's eyes fill with tears. Before she could stop herself, she reached out and touched his face, her cold fingers gentle against his warm skin. "Ethan," she whispered. He turned toward her touch, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made the world around them disappear. For a moment, there was only the three of them in the snowy garden, only the warmth of his skin under her fingers and the way he was looking at her like she was everything he had ever wanted. Then Zoe let out a happy gurgle and grabbed a handful of Nia's hair, breaking the spell and reminding them both of where they were. They laughed and pulled apart, but something had shifted between them, some line had been crossed that they couldn't uncross. That evening, after Zoe was asleep, they sat by the fireplace in the guest house sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed easily, touching on books they had read, places they wanted to travel, dreams they had put aside for practical concerns. "I used to want to teach," Nia found herself saying, the wine making her more open than usual. "Not just because I love kids, but because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be the adult who believed in children when they didn't believe in themselves." "You still could," Ethan said. "Once Zoe is older, if that's what you really want. It's not practical now. Besides, I like working for you. I like feeling useful, being part of something bigger than just survival." "You're more than useful," Ethan said seriously. "You've changed everything for me. Before you came, work was all I had. I went through the motions of living without really experiencing any of it. Now." He paused, looking into the fire. "Now I have reasons to come home at night. I have people who matter to me." People. Nia's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You and Zoe," Ethan said simply. "You've become my family." The word hit Nia like a physical blow. Family. Not employees, not charity cases, not temporary guests. Family. "Ethan," she started, but he held up his hand. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know there are power dynamics we have to consider, practical concerns, a dozen reasons why this might not work. But I also know that I'm falling in love with you, and I hope, that maybe you feel the same way." There it was. The words that had been hovering between them for weeks, finally spoken aloud. Nia felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, with safety behind her and the unknown stretching ahead. "I do," she whispered. "I do feel the same way. I'm terrified, but I do." "What are you terrified of?" "Everything," Nia admitted. "Of losing this, of losing you, of making the wrong choice for Zoe. Of not being enough for someone like you." Ethan moved closer on the couch, his hand reaching up to cup her face. "You're everything," he said softly. "You're everything I never knew I was looking for." When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Nia felt herself melting into him, all her fears and reservations dissolving in the warmth of his touch. This was what she had been afraid to hope for, not just security or stability, but love. Real, deep, transformative love that made everything else seem possible. They pulled apart slowly, both breathing hard, both aware that they had just changed everything between them. "What happens now?" Nia asked. "Now we figure it out as we go," Ethan replied. "Together." "Together," Nia repeated, testing the word on her tongue. For someone who had been alone for so long, the concept felt foreign but wonderful. "I love you," Ethan said again, as if he needed to make sure she understood. "I love you too," Nia replied, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what those words might cost her. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the world in pristine white. Inside the warm guest house, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close and began to dream about the future they might build together. The phone call came at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in January. Nia woke to the sound of Ethan's voice through the baby monitor. He must have been in the main house when it rang, but his conversation was loud enough to carry across the garden. "What do you mean the shipment was seized?" His voice was tense, strained in a way she had never heard before. "All of it?" "That's impossible." Nia slipped out of bed and padded to the window, where she could see lights blazing in every room of the main house. Something was very wrong. The next morning, Ethan appeared at her door looking like he hadn't slept at all. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his hair sticking up and his clothes wrinkled as if he had slept in them. "There's been a problem with the business," he said without preamble. "A major problem. I need to ask a favor." "Of course," Nia replied immediately. "Whatever you need. Can you handle things at the office today? All the phone calls, the meetings, the crisis management. I need to fly to Los Angeles to deal with this situation in person." "What kind of situation?" Ethan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she had learned meant he was overwhelmed. "Someone tipped off customs about one of our major shipments. They seized everything, millions of dollars worth of inventory that we've already sold to retailers. If I can't get it released or find replacement products, we're going to have to default on contracts that could bankrupt the company." Nia felt her stomach drop. The company wasn't just Ethan's livelihood, it was hers too, and Zoe's. If the business failed, they would lose everything they had built together. "Is there anything I can do besides handle the office?" she asked. "Pray," Ethan said grimly. "And maybe start thinking about backup plans, just in case." He left that afternoon, and Nia threw herself into managing the crisis from her end. The phone rang constantly with worried retailers, angry customers, and panicked employees. She fielded calls, rescheduled meetings, and tried to project confidence even though she was terrified about what this might mean for their future. The worst part was the rumors. By the second day, word had leaked to industry publications that Rivers Imports was facing major problems. Competitors began circling like vultures, trying to poach employees and steal clients. Nia found herself defending Ethan's reputation and the company's integrity to people who were all too eager to believe the worst. "Is it true that Mr. Rivers is involved in smuggling?" asked one particularly aggressive reporter who somehow got her direct number. "Absolutely not," Nia replied firmly. "Rivers Imports has always operated with complete transparency and adherence to all regulations. This is simply a bureaucratic misunderstanding that will be resolved quickly." She hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. Ethan called every evening to update her on his progress, and each conversation made it clear that the situation was worse than he had initially thought. The customs seizure wasn't random. Someone had deliberately provided false information to authorities, claiming that the shipment contained contraband. Even though the products were legitimate, the legal process of proving that and getting them released was complicated and expensive. "It's sabotage," he told her during one late-night call. "Someone wants to destroy the company, and they're using the legal system to do it." "Who would do something like that?" "I have a few theories, but I can't prove anything yet. The important thing is figuring out how to survive this without losing everything." As the days passed, Nia watched Ethan's confident empire begin to crumble from the inside. Employees started updating their resumes, clients began canceling orders, and vendors demanded immediate payment for outstanding invoices. The stress of keeping everything together while projecting strength and stability was exhausting, but she refused to let Ethan down. More than that, she realized that she genuinely cared about the company's success for reasons that had nothing to do with her own security. She had seen how hard Ethan worked, how much pride he took in providing quality products and treating his employees well. The business wasn't just a source of income for him, it was his legacy, his contribution to the world, and watching it threatened made her angry in a way that surprised her. "You don't have to do this," Tasha said during one of their phone calls. "You could start looking for other jobs, make sure you and Zoe are protected if everything falls apart." "I'm not abandoning him," Nia replied without hesitation. "Not when he needs me most. Even if it means you might lose everything too." "Yes," Nia said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Even then. The breakthrough came on Friday afternoon. Nia was in the middle of a difficult conversation with a major client when her computer pinged with an urgent email from Ethan. The subject line was simply, "Found the evidence." She quickly ended her call and opened the email, which contained a series of forwarded messages between one of their competitors and a customs official. The messages made it clear that the seizure had been orchestrated as part of a scheme to drive River's imports out of business and steal their market share. Nia's hands shook as she read through the evidence. It was exactly what they needed to clear the company's name and get the seized shipment released, but it also revealed just how deliberate and malicious the attack had been. Her phone rang almost immediately. "Did you see the email?" Ethan's voice was exhausted but triumphant. "I saw it. This is incredible. How did you find this?" "A friend in the industry heard rumors and did some digging. Apparently our competitor has been bragging about their clever strategy to get us out of the way. What happens now? Now we take this to the authorities and expose what really happened. The shipment should be released within days, and we'll probably be able to sue for damages. The company is going to survive, Nia. We're going to make it through this." The relief that flooded through Nia was so intense she had to sit down. They were safe. Zoe's future was secure. The life they had built together wasn't going to disappear. But more than that, she realized something important about herself and her feelings for Ethan. When faced with the possibility of losing everything, her first instinct hadn't been to protect herself, it had been to protect him. She loved him not just as a romantic partner, but as a person whose dreams and work mattered to her independent of what he could provide. That evening, she was sitting in the garden with Zoe when she heard the sound of a car pulling up the drive. Ethan appeared around the corner of the house looking tired but victorious, his tie loosened and his jacket slung over his shoulder. "We did it," he said, dropping his bag and opening his arms. "We actually did it." Nia ran to him, Zoe babbling excitedly in her arms, and let herself be wrapped in his embrace. He felt solid and warm and real, and she knew with absolute certainty that she never wanted to let him go. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered against his chest. "You never gave up, even when everything looked hopeless." "I couldn't give up," Ethan replied, pulling back to look at her face. "I had too much to fight for. I had you and Zoe waiting for me to come home." The words made Nia's heart flutter with joy and something deeper. The recognition that they had become a real family, not just in name but in truth. They had weathered their first major crisis together, and they had come through it stronger than before. "I love you," she said, meaning it more than she had ever meant anything in her life. "I love you too," Ethan replied, leaning down to kiss her as Zoe giggled and reached for both of their faces. "Both of you. My girls. My girls." The possessive warmth in his voice made Nia feel like she was home at last. The first signs of trouble appeared on a Thursday morning in February, almost a month after the business crisis had been resolved. Nia was getting ready for work when she noticed a car parked across from the estate's main gate, a beat-up sedan that looked distinctly out of place in the affluent neighborhood. She thought nothing of it at first, assuming it belonged to a delivery driver or repair person. But when she saw the same car there the next morning, and again on Monday, a cold dread began to settle in her stomach. Someone was watching the property, and she had a terrible suspicion about who it might be. Her fears were confirmed on Tuesday afternoon when she was walking back from the office with Zoe in her stroller. As they approached the guest house, a familiar figure stepped out from behind the garden shed, and Nia's blood turned to ice. "Hello, Nia." Marcus Johnson. Zoe's biological father, stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking exactly the same as he had 18 months ago when he disappeared from their lives. Same cocky smile, same expensive clothes that never quite hid the weakness in his character, same way of looking at her like she should be grateful for his attention. "What are you doing here?" Nia's voice came out steadier than she felt. She positioned herself protectively in front of the stroller, though Zoe was too young to understand what was happening. "I came to see my daughter," Marcus said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "And to talk to you, of course. I've been hearing some interesting things about your new living situation." "She's not your daughter," Nia replied firmly. You gave up any claim to her when you abandoned us. Legally, I'm still her father. I never signed away my parental rights. Marcus stepped closer, and Nia caught the familiar scent of expensive cologne mixed with something harder, alcohol, even though it was barely past noon. I've been doing some research, and it turns out I have rights. Rights that might be worth exploring, especially given your current circumstances. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Nia felt her heart racing, but she forced herself to remain calm. What do you want, Marcus? I want to be part of my daughter's life, he said, but his eyes were calculating, focused on the expensive estate visible through the trees rather than on the child he claimed to care about. I want to make up for lost time. And I think, given how well you seem to be doing for yourself, you can afford to be generous about sharing custody. Custody. The word hit Nia like a physical blow. The thought of Zoe spending time alone with this man, who had never shown the slightest interest in being a father until he realized there might be money involved, made her feel sick. You haven't even looked at her, Nia pointed out. You've been talking for 5 minutes and you haven't once looked at your supposed daughter. Marcus glanced down at the stroller with obvious reluctance, and Nia saw the exact moment when he realized he felt nothing for the beautiful child looking up at him with curious eyes. But instead of admitting it, he doubled down on his performance. She's grown so much, he said with fake sentimentality. She looks just like me, doesn't she? Zoe actually looked nothing like Marcus. Her features were all Nia's, with the same dark eyes and full lips, the same determined chin. But Nia wasn't about to point that out and give him ammunition to use against her later. What do you really want? She asked again. Marcus abandoned his pretense of caring about Zoe and focused on what actually interested him. I want what's fair. You're living in luxury now, thanks to your sugar daddy arrangement, and I think the father of your child deserves some consideration. Maybe a monthly payment to help with my expenses, in exchange for me being reasonable about custody matters. You mean blackmail? I mean a practical arrangement between two adults who want what's best for their child. Nia felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. This man had left her alone and struggling, had never sent a single dollar to help support the child he helped create, and now he wanted to profit from her hard-won stability. Worse, he was threatening to use Zoe as a pawn in his schemes. Get off this property, she said quietly. Right now. I don't think you're in a position to make demands, Marcus replied, his mask of friendliness finally slipping. Your rich boyfriend might be able to buy you nice things, but he can't change the fact that I have legal rights. Rights that could make things very complicated for your comfortable little arrangement. Is there a problem here? Ethan's voice came from behind Nia, calm but with an edge of steel that she had never heard before. She turned to see him walking across the garden, still dressed in his business suit but moving with the focused intensity of a man prepared for conflict. Marcus straightened up, suddenly less confident now that he was facing another man instead of just Nia. You must be the famous Ethan Rivers. I'm Marcus Johnson, Zoe's father. No, Ethan said simply, stopping beside Nia and placing a protective hand on her shoulder. You're the man who abandoned them. There's a difference. Actually, there isn't, legally speaking. Marcus tried to regain his composure, but Nia could see that Ethan's presence had rattled him. I have rights, and I intend to exercise them. What rights would those be? Ethan asked conversationally. The right to pay child support you've never contributed. The right to medical decision-making for a child whose health emergencies you weren't around for. The right to custody of a daughter you've never fed, never bathed, never comforted when she was sick. Each word hit Marcus like a slap, and Nia watched his face redden with anger and embarrassment. I was young, I made mistakes, Marcus protested. But I'm ready to step up now, be the father she needs. What you're ready to do, Ethan said, his voice deadly quiet, is exploit a child for financial gain. And that's not going to happen. You can't stop me, Marcus blustered. I have legal standing, and there are courts that will enforce my rights. You're welcome to try, Ethan replied calmly. But you should know that I have some of the best family lawyers in the state on retainer. They'll be very interested in your complete abandonment of parental responsibilities, your failure to pay any support, and your current attempt at extortion. I'm sure a judge will find your sudden interest in fatherhood fascinating. Marcus looked back and forth between them, clearly realizing that this wasn't going to be as easy as he had expected. This isn't over, he said finally, but the threat sounded hollow now. Yes, it is, Ethan said firmly. If you come near this property again, if you contact Nia or approach Zoe in any way, I will have you arrested for harassment and trespassing. And I will make sure that every legal avenue available to us is pursued to the fullest extent. Do I make myself clear? Marcus stared at him for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he seemed to realize that he was outmatched. You can't protect them forever, he said, but he was already backing away toward the gate. Watch me, Ethan replied. They stood there together, watching Marcus retreat to his car and drive away, until the sound of his engine faded completely. Only then did Nia allow herself to breathe again. Are you okay? Ethan asked immediately, turning to wrap her in his arms. I'm fine, Nia said, but she was shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. I can't believe he found us. I can't believe he had the nerve to threaten us. He's not going to hurt you, Ethan said firmly. Either of you. I won't let him. But what if he does have legal rights? What if he can really force a custody arrangement? Ethan pulled back to look at her face, his expression serious but reassuring. Then we'll fight him with everything we have. I meant what I said about the lawyers, they're the best in the business, and they'll find ways to protect Zoe that Marcus hasn't thought of. This is my fault, Nia said, tears starting to fall. I brought this into your life. You shouldn't have to deal with my problems. Hey, Ethan said gently, cupping her face in his hands. Look at me. This isn't your fault, and they're not just your problems anymore. We're a family, remember? That means we face things together. The word family made Nia's chest tighten with emotion. Even faced with the threat of Marcus's return, even knowing that loving her meant taking on complications he had never asked for, Ethan wasn't backing down. He was choosing them, choosing to fight for them, and that meant everything. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Ethan replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. All of us. And nothing is going to change that. As they walked back to the guest house together, Zoe babbling happily in her stroller as if nothing had happened, Nia felt a fierce determination settling in her chest. Marcus thought he could waltz back into their lives and disrupt the happiness they had built, but he was wrong. She had too much to protect now, too much to lose, and she would fight with everything she had to keep her family safe. The test had begun, but they would face it together. And together, she was beginning to believe, they were strong enough to survive anything. The envelope arrived on a Saturday morning in March, delivered by special courier while Nia was feeding Zoe breakfast. The return address bore the logo of one of the city's most prestigious law firms, and Nia's hands shook as she signed for it. Inside were legal documents that made her worst fears concrete. Marcus was filing for joint custody of Zoe, claiming that his previous absence was due to being unaware of his rights and responsibilities as a father. The petition painted him as a reformed man eager to provide for his daughter, while subtly implying that Nia's current living situation might not be in the child's best interests. He's claiming I'm an unfit mother, Nia said, her voice hollow with disbelief as she read the documents to Ethan over the phone. He's saying that my cohabitation with an unmarried partner creates an unstable environment for Zoe. That's ridiculous, Ethan replied immediately. Any judge can see that Zoe is thriving. She's healthy, happy, well cared for. His own abandonment of her speaks volumes about his fitness as a parent. But what if it works? What if the court decides that a father's rights are more important than what's actually best for her? It won't come to that, Ethan said firmly. I'm calling our lawyer right now. We'll fight this with everything we have. The legal battle that followed was exhausting and humiliating. Marcus's lawyer painted Nia as a woman who had deliberately kept a father from his child, then manipulated a wealthy man into supporting her lifestyle. They questioned her character, her motives, even her capabilities as a mother. Meanwhile, Marcus played the role of the repentant father perfectly, claiming that youthful irresponsibility had led to his initial departure, but that he was now mature and financially stable enough to be part of Zoe's life. He had somehow managed to clean up his appearance and present himself as a respectable member of society, though Nia suspected Ethan's private investigator would eventually uncover the truth about his current circumstances. The worst part was the court-ordered psychological evaluation. A stern woman with a clipboard spent hours asking Nia invasive questions about her relationship with Ethan, her living arrangements, her emotional stability. Every answer felt like it could be twisted against her, every truth made to sound calculated or suspicious. "Tell me about your financial dependence on Mr. Rivers," the evaluator said during one particularly brutal session. "I'm not financially dependent on him," Nia replied carefully. "I work for his company and earn my own salary. But you also live in housing he provides, receive health insurance through his company, and benefit from resources you couldn't afford on your own. I work for those benefits. I earn them. Some might say that your romantic relationship with your employer creates a conflict of interest. That your job security depends on maintaining his personal affection." Nia felt like she was being dissected, every aspect of her life examined for signs of weakness or deception. The woman asking these questions had never been homeless, never held a sick child while wondering how to pay for medical care, never had to choose between buying food and keeping the lights on. How could she possibly understand the miracle of finding both love and security in the same person? The stress of the legal proceedings began to take its toll on all of them. Ethan threw himself into work with renewed intensity, determined to prove his company's stability and his own character to the court. Nia found herself second-guessing every decision, every interaction with Zoe, wondering how it might be interpreted by hostile eyes. Even Zoe seemed to sense the tension. She became fussier than usual, clinging to Nia during the day and waking frequently at night. The happy, secure baby she had become was slowly being replaced by an anxious child who seemed to understand that something threatening was happening around her. "This is destroying us," Nia said one evening as she and Ethan sat exhausted on the couch after finally getting Zoe to sleep. "Even if we win, the damage might be irreversible." "We can't think like that," Ethan replied, but she could see the strain in his face, the way this battle was wearing him down too. "We have to focus on protecting her, no matter what it costs." The turning point came when Ethan's private investigator finally uncovered the truth about Marcus's recent activities. It turned out that his sudden interest in fatherhood coincided exactly with a significant gambling debt and the threat of physical consequences if he didn't pay up quickly. His reformed appearance and claims of financial stability were elaborate fiction designed to make him appear worthy of custody. And the child support payments that would come with it. But the real bombshell came in the form of medical records that the investigator managed to obtain through legal channels. Records that revealed something Marcus had clearly hoped would never come to light. "He can't be Zoe's biological father," their lawyer explained during an emergency meeting. "The timing doesn't work." According to these medical records, Marcus was undergoing treatment for a condition that would have made it impossible for him to father a child during the period when Zoe was conceived. Nia stared at the documents in shock. "But he never denied it when I told him I was pregnant. He acted like, he seemed to accept. Because he knew you'd been dating exclusively and assumed the child was his," Ethan said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "And when he decided to abandon you both, he never bothered to question paternity because he didn't want the responsibility anyway. So he has no legal rights to her at all." "None whatsoever," the lawyer confirmed. "Once we present this evidence to the court, his petition will be dismissed immediately. He's been filing false documents and making fraudulent claims about his parental status." The relief that flooded through Nia was so intense she had to put her head between her knees to keep from fainting. Zoe was safe. Marcus couldn't touch her, couldn't take her away, couldn't disrupt their lives ever again. But with the relief came another realization that hit her like a thunderbolt. If Marcus wasn't Zoe's biological father, then who was? The answer came to her slowly, pieces of memory falling into place like puzzle pieces. There had been one night, just one, about a week before she started dating Marcus exclusively. A work party where she'd had too much to drink and ended up going home with a colleague she barely knew. She had been so embarrassed by the encounter that she'd never mentioned it to anyone, and when she realized she was pregnant a few weeks later, she had naturally assumed Marcus was the father since they were sleeping together regularly by then. "I need to tell you something," she said to Ethan that night after they'd put Zoe to bed. "Something I should have told you before." He listened without judgment as she explained about the night she couldn't quite remember, about her assumptions regarding Zoe's paternity, about the confusion and shame she'd carried for so long. "So you don't actually know who her biological father is?" Ethan asked when she finished. "No," Nia admitted. "I was too scared and embarrassed to pursue it at the time, and then Marcus was acting like the father, so I just let it be." "Does it matter?" Ethan asked gently. "I don't know. Does it matter to you?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, looking toward the stairs where Zoe was sleeping peacefully in her crib. "The only thing that matters to me is that she's ours," he said finally. "Biology doesn't make someone a parent. Love does. Commitment does. Being there through the hard times and the good times, that's what makes a family. Even though she's not yours. Even though I lied by omission about her paternity." "You didn't lie," Ethan said firmly. "You told me what you believed to be true based on the information you had. And Zoe is mine in every way that counts. I've been there for her first steps, her first words, her first illness. I've changed her diapers and fed her bottles and stayed up all night when she was teething. If that doesn't make me her father, then the word has no meaning." Nia felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the depth of his love and acceptance. This man who owed them nothing had given them everything, and even faced with the complexity of Zoe's true parentage, his commitment never wavered. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Don't be scared," Ethan replied, pulling her close. "We've weathered the storm. Marcus can't hurt us anymore, and we know the truth about where we stand. The only question now is what we want to build going forward." "What do you mean?" Ethan pulled back to look at her face, his expression serious but warm. "I mean that I want to make this official. I want to marry you, adopt Zoe legally, make sure that no one can ever question our family again." The words hung between them like a bridge to a future Nia had never dared to imagine. Marriage. Adoption. A real, legal, permanent family built on love instead of circumstance. "Are you proposing to me?" she asked, her heart racing. "I'm proposing that we stop letting other people define what we are to each other," Ethan replied. "I'm proposing that we choose each other, officially and forever." Looking into his eyes, seeing the certainty and love there, Nia realized that the truth hadn't complicated their relationship, it had simplified it. All the questions about obligation and gratitude, about whether their feelings were real or just born from necessity, fell away in the face of what they had built together. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." As they held each other in the quiet guest house, with their daughter sleeping safely upstairs and their future finally secure, Nia understood that sometimes the most important truths weren't about the past. They were about choosing who you wanted to be going forward, and who you wanted to become it with. 1 year later, on a perfect spring morning when the garden was bursting with the tulips Ethan had planted during their first winter together, Nia stood in front of a mirror adjusting her simple white dress and wondering how she had gotten so lucky. The wedding was small, just a handful of close friends and the officiant, gathered in the garden where they had fallen in love. Zoe, now walking confidently and chattering in her own mysterious language, wore a tiny flower girl dress and carried a basket of petals she was more interested in eating than scattering. "You ready for this?" Tasha asked, appearing beside her with the bouquet they had picked from Ethan's garden that morning. As Nia's maid of honor, she had insisted on flying in from across the country to witness what she called the most romantic comeback story ever. I think so, Nia replied, though her hands were shaking slightly as she took the flowers. It still feels a little unreal, you know. Like I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream. Honey, I've seen the way that man looks at you. If this is a dream, it's one you're both having. Tasha squeezed her hand reassuringly. Besides, you've earned every bit of happiness you're about to promise each other. Don't you dare feel guilty about it. Through the window, Nia could see the guests taking their seats, Mrs. Rodriguez from the daycare, some of Ethan's business associates who had become genuine friends, and the lawyer who had helped them defeat Marcus's custody claim and was now handling Zoe's adoption paperwork. It was a small group, but every person there had played a role in the life they had built together. Mama! Zoe's voice called from the hallway, followed by the sound of her little feet running toward the bedroom. She burst through the door and immediately reached up to be held, her flower basket forgotten on the floor. Hey, baby girl, Nia said, lifting her daughter carefully to avoid wrinkling either of their dresses. Are you ready to go see Daddy? Zoe clapped her hands and said something that sounded like Dada, though her vocabulary was still more enthusiasm than clarity. She had started calling Ethan Dada about 6 months ago, much to his delight and emotional overwhelm. The adoption wouldn't be final for another few weeks, but in every way that mattered, he was already her father. The music started outside, a simple acoustic guitar playing a song Ethan had chosen because it reminded him of the night they first admitted they loved each other. Nia took a deep breath, kissed Zoe's forehead, and prepared to walk into the future she had never dared to dream possible. The ceremony itself was a blur of joy and tears and promises. Ethan looked handsome in his dark suit, but it was the expression on his face when he saw her walking toward him that nearly made her stumble. Pure love, wonder, and gratitude all mixed together in a look that said more than any words could. You're beautiful, he whispered when she reached his side, and Nia felt her heart flutter the same way it had that first night in the hospital when he had appeared like an answer to prayers she hadn't known she was praying. The vows they had written themselves were simple but heartfelt. Promises to love each other through good times and bad, to be partners in raising Zoe, to build a family based on choice rather than obligation. When Ethan promised to love Zoe as his own daughter, from this day forward and for all the days that follow, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. You may kiss the bride, the officiant said finally, and when Ethan leaned down to kiss her, Nia felt like she was sealing not just their marriage but the end of one chapter of her life and the beginning of another. Zoe, who had been remarkably well behaved during the ceremony, chose that moment to let out a delighted shriek and reach for both of them, making the guests laugh and reminding everyone that this wasn't just a wedding, it was the official creation of a family. The reception was held right there in the garden, with tables set up under string lights and a small dance floor where Zoe could toddle around safely. The food was catered by the same bakery that had provided pastries during their courtship, and the cake was a simple 2-layer creation decorated with fresh flowers from the garden. Speech! Speech, someone called out during dinner, and Ethan stood up with his champagne glass, pulling Nia up beside him. A year and a half ago, he began, his voice carrying easily across the small gathering, I thought I knew what my life was going to look like. Work, success, achievement, but not much else. I had convinced myself that was enough, that I didn't need the things other people seemed to want. He looked down at Nia, his eyes warm with memory. Then one night, in the middle of a storm, 2 people quite literally fell into my life and changed everything. They taught me that success without love is just noise, that a house without laughter is just a building, and that the best things in life aren't things at all, they're the people you choose to share them with. Nia felt tears pricking her eyes as he continued. Nia, you didn't just let me help you, you helped me become the man I always wanted to be but never knew how to find. And Zoe. He looked over at their daughter, who was sitting in Mrs. Rodriguez's lap and clapping along with the speech even though she didn't understand the words. Zoe, you taught me that being a father isn't about biology or legal documents. It's about showing up every day, choosing love every day, and feeling grateful every day that you get to be part of something bigger than yourself. He raised his glass, and the rest of the guests followed suit. To family, he said simply. However it finds you, however it forms, however imperfect and complicated and beautiful it turns out to be. To family, the guests echoed, and Nia felt the words settle into her heart like a benediction. Later, after the guests had gone home and Zoe was asleep in her crib, Nia and Ethan sat on the porch of what was now officially their home. He had transferred ownership of the guest house to her as a wedding gift, saying she had already made it more of a home than he had ever managed with the main house. So, Ethan said, pulling her close against his side, how does it feel to be Mrs. Rivers? Strange, Nia admitted with a laugh. Good strange, but strange. I keep thinking someone's going to realize there's been a mistake and take it all away. No mistakes, Ethan said firmly. No take-backs. You're stuck with me now. And you're stuck with us. A package deal, remember? The best deal I ever made. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out over the garden where they had built their love. Nia thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, from desperate single mother to beloved wife, from charity case to equal partner, from survival to true happiness. I have something to tell you, she said eventually, nervous butterflies dancing in her stomach. What's that? I'm pregnant. Ethan went very still beside her. You're, what? Pregnant. About 8 weeks. I found out yesterday but wanted to wait until after the wedding to tell you. She turned to face him, trying to read his expression in the dim porch light. I know we didn't plan this, I know it's going to complicate things. Complicate things? Ethan interrupted, his voice full of wonder. Nia, this is the best news I've ever gotten. A baby? Our baby. You're happy. I'm ecstatic, he said, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around despite the fact that they were sitting down. Zoe's going to be a big sister. We're going to have another little person to love and worry about and spoil completely. So you're not concerned about the timing, or the practical implications, or... I'm concerned about keeping you healthy and happy, Ethan said, setting her back down and immediately placing his hands protectively over her still flat stomach. I'm concerned about making sure this baby knows from day one how wanted and loved they are. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. We're really doing this, Nia said, half to herself. We're really going to be a family of 4. We're already a family, Ethan corrected gently. We're just going to be a bigger one. As they held each other on the porch of their home, with their daughter sleeping peacefully inside and a new baby growing safely in Nia's womb, she finally understood what Ethan's mother had meant about stories being better in candlelight. Not because they were more mysterious, but because they were more intimate, more precious, more worthy of being treasured and remembered. This was her story now. Not the fairy tale she had once dreamed of as a little girl in foster care, but something richer and more complex and infinitely more real. A story about second chances and chosen family, about love that shows up in the most unexpected ways, about the courage to trust happiness when it finally finds you. And as Ethan whispered plans for the future against her hair, about cribs and college funds and family vacations and growing old together. Nia closed her eyes and let herself believe, finally and completely, that this was just the beginning of their happily ever after. The guest house had become a home. The employer had become a husband. The charity case had become a beloved wife and mother. And the scared young woman who had collapsed in the rain 18 months ago had become someone she barely recognized, someone confident and cherished and secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. When she woke up tomorrow, it wouldn't be from a dream. It would be to the reality of a life built on love, sustained by hope, and blessed with the kind of happiness that makes all the struggles that came before seem like just the prologue to the real story. Their story. Their family. Their forever.